Hello, my friends. It's time for Thought Shifting Thursdays. So, we're told as a child, or even as an adult, don't cry. How about don't get angry? Stop yelling. And not to say that these are, I mean, uh, parents do have to manage their children, right? We do have to have healthy boundaries around these things. But as a parent, it's difficult, right, to always send these messages in a loving way. So we've all gotten messages that have helped to, in some way, repress our natural emotions. So I'm going to share with you today some techniques because there's most of the techniques that I use with clients, when I use in classes, are all about shifting to a positive vibration, um, to a positive mindset. And yet, and I do quite often, though, remind people, and especially if someone's doing a spiritual practice and they're coming back and they're saying, "Wow, I just I don't feel good. It's not helping me," right? Um, then what's important is then to do emotional release techniques. So I'm going to share some of those with you today. But this is what happens. Spiritual bypass is a term that we use in New Thought and self-help, and it means, hey Naomi, good to see you. And it means that we're doing a spiritual practice to make us feel better, and inadvertently we end up repressing emotion. So I'm doing an affirmation or a visualization because something in my life isn't working right. Um, so that can be that is positive, right? And most of the time, for me anyway, and most people, that works and I feel better. But if I do spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer, or an affirmation, and or some of the process that I've shared in these videos, the process from busting loose from the money game, the pivoting process, and I've got a big knot in my gut when I'm done, it means that my body, my psyche is inviting, calling for a deeper level of healing. So I'm going to share a bunch of techniques with you that I've developed for myself over the years. I've shared with clients. They're all quite powerful. So let's start with just journaling. That's one way to get your feelings. And let me just back up a little bit and say, it kind of amazes me sometimes. I'll be talking to a client and ask, when's the last time you cried? And some people are not good at crying, at letting out emotion. And then, they're in psychosynthesis, the spiritual psychology I trained in. We identify that there's two extremes, right? There's people who are emotional all the time, and one phrase for that is wallowing in emotion, and or just not being able to control it. And then on the other extreme, you have people who are repressing emotion all the time. And so if you're one who's constantly expressing emotion, then probably the techniques to raise your vibration and get out of that would be more appropriate. If you're one of those people who, like me, originally, my default was to repress emotion, then these techniques can be very helpful. And if you're one of those, I may as well address that. If you're one of those who's in emotion all the time, it's interesting because there's, one school of thought, one school in spiritual practice and self-help practice is all about shifting to the positive. And then there are schools that are all about healing the emotions. There aren't that many that do both. And that's what I am emphasizing and encouraging you to do is, if you do a spiritual practice and you don't feel better, do an emotional release. And once you do that release, now shift to the positive. Or if you're naturally doing a lot of emotional releasing, then make sure that you're also doing a practice to shift to the positive, because otherwise you just get stuck in like a hamster wheel and continue to be in the uncomfortable emotion, and it doesn't get you anywhere until you then shift it. So it's a both and in this case, and in fact almost anything that looks like an either or can be a both and. So journaling is one way, just automatic writing. Just got some emotion, just start writing, and let whatever, don't edit, don't, just let whatever wants to come out, come out. Sometimes people will end up like tearing the page with their pen because it gets so intense, right? The releasing of emotion. I find the best way is to actually get sound out verbally. I'm going to share with you a really deep way to do that in a few moments, but let me say it this way first. When I'm meditating in the morning, and this doesn't happen very often anymore, but I will say this, that I'm writing a book called the Joy Factor, and one of the chapters is shadow joy. And really, one of the things I talk about is that, I'm living this amazingly joyful life all the time, virtually all the time. And part of it is because I embrace my emotion, right? So even if I'm sad, I'm embracing that and feeling beauty in my sadness, right? But I don't know that I'm certain that I would not be living at the high level of joy that I am if I hadn't done decades of shadow work, of healing deep emotion. So what was the practice I was going to share? So when I'm meditating, if I sit down and I meditate and I've got some anxiousness or some sadness or some frustration going on, first thing I will do is let the sound out. So if it's sadness, I'll cry. If it's anxiousness, I don't know, or fear, then I'll do something with that. I don't know what the sound is for that, but I'll just feel it, right? Shudder with a fear. If it's anger, again, even less, hasn't happened probably in years, but if there is, I'll scream it out, right? And if there's people around, I'll scream into a pillow, if necessary. So once I get the emotion out, now when I go into deep meditation, it becomes deeper than ever, because the way I like to describe it is if I'm walking around half filled with frustration or sadness or whatever, and I sit down to meditation, I'm only going to be able to fill up a certain amount halfway with spirit, with the positivity, with the light, the love, the peace. But once I have emoted, once I have voided myself of the feeling, now I'm an empty vessel that can be filled with spirit. And that's why it works so well to do the both and. So, getting the sound out. If you're got sadness, just do a little cry. I'll share a story with you. When Allison, our daughter, was about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years old, probably 6 years old, she had some upset happen, and I said, what do you think would be a helpful way to get your anger out? She said, I'm going to go out on the hill. I'm going to show you the hill at our house. I'm going to go out on the hill, and I'm just going to scream. And I just said, fantastic. That is a great way to do it. And the beauty of it is by asking the question, she came up with the idea herself, rather than me saying, why don't you go scream on the hill? Wouldn't have probably been received as well. And empowered her to come up with her own solutions. So I'll tell you one, is if you got anger, I was talking to a client recently, and he was going through a tough time, and he said, I don't think he'd even cried, right? He might have cried once, and then I said, but have you gotten the anger out, right? You expressed the anger, and this was completely foreign to him. And he's somebody who's been practicing spiritual techniques and self-help techniques for 30 years probably. So haven't checked in since I suggested some of these techniques. So we'll find out soon. But I always find out with clients that it makes a big difference to get that emotion out. And here's the thing that I say to people all the time. If I feel it's not okay to be angry, which is, again, what a lot of us were told when we were children, if it's not okay to be angry, and I'm angry, then guess what? It's not okay to be me right now. I'm really saying, I'm giving a message to my own subconscious mind, my own psyche, it's not okay to be me. In other words, not okay. So, here's an exercise for getting the anger out that I've done with people in person. You can hit a pillow, you've heard about that. I don't remember even where I heard about this, but I find it extremely effective, is get a rubber hose or a stick. Rubber hoses work really well. And just find a surface to smash it on and start just cussing out the anger and getting it out. I've got, logs in my backyard for our sweat lodge, so I'll have people just hit a log and just get the anger out, and it's amazing what starts coming out that you didn't even know was there. It can be rage, right? We've got a quick little pause there on Instagram for connection, but here we're back. And so, once again, once you get that anger out, once it's voided, then infill with light, with love, with positivity, with what you really want in your life. Fill yourself up with a positive, because you've created a void, and now it's ready. You'll just, like a sponge, you'll suck in that positivity and embody it, and then once we're embodying it, it starts overflowing, and then it has a positive effect on everything we do and everyone we come in contact with. So let's see. I think I'll do maybe we'll save the release and shift till the end. It's a little bit more complicated. But I'll tell you about something that I did. If you've got a lot of repressed emotion from the past, I did this when I was in my, I would say mid 20s, 25, 26, 27. And it was mostly pine trees and birch, somebody says. So I developed this, and it came out of a process called body electronics. I'll give you a little bit of background of this, just to give you a flavor of it. So really powerful. I shared this, I think, once before on the videos. I don't know if anyone's still doing this work, but it would be done in groups usually. I guess people could do one-on-one, not one-on session, but like 3 or 4 on one session. But I did it like within workshops that I was guided with. We had a facilitator. And you'd have massage tables, and you'd have like one person lying on the table, and then 3 or 4 people sitting around that person and holding pressure points. And the interesting thing about it, and so people are encouraged then, just notice what comes up, whether it be images, whether it be feelings from the past, from childhood. Sometimes past life stuff would come up. And just feel the feelings, and in fact intensify the feelings. Very much like the very beginning of the process, which I'll address that in a few moments as well. And then and people would cycle through emotions. They'd go through sadness and crying, and then anger and screaming, and then laughter would come, and it would just cycle around. And the really interesting thing about it was, as you were holding people's points with your thumbs or fingers, just before a cathartic experience would start to happen, they would start to heat up, the points that you're holding. And they would get so hot that your fingers or thumbs would actually blister. You'd be sitting there surrendering, right? Because you'd want to do almost anything to let go. But the protocol was to continue to hold on. And this would go on for one person for like 3 hours. And it was just an incredibly cathartic process. And then, just before the catharsis would end, the screaming or the crying or even laughter, not so much heating up with laughter, then the points would cool down. This person's almost done for the moment. And then they'd heat up again, and they'd go through another image, another memory, another opportunity to release. I didn't, and there was a whole science to what points you hold for what particular emotions that are wanting to be released. So what I developed for myself, because I didn't study all the point science about it, is and this is in my book, The Magic of the Soul, by the way, is I would just go to a place, and I do this on my retreats sometimes with people, and I've done it occasionally one-on-one and workshops. But what you do is you're outdoors, and you can modify this if you don't want to be outdoors, or if you can't run, but you just run, or you do some physical exercise that gets your blood pumping, your heart pumping, your just livening up your entire physiology. And then once you get tired, out of breath, you lie down, and then you just notice, where's the tension on my body, and you press that area. what I find is very often solar plexus, obviously, that's where we hold a lot of emotion, down in the gut, in the pelvis, sometimes just even in the head, in the throat. A lot of people have a lot of repressed emotion in the throat, heart. It can be anywhere in your body. And you just press that area and let the sound out, whatever sound wants to come out. You might not even identify the feeling or the image yet, but very much like body electronics, you want to intensify it. And just let that sound out, and then you'll get to a point where you'll either take a deep breath, or you'll start laughing at the absurdity of it all. And then you do the infill. Then you're just, your arms are open. If it's a sunny day, here's the sun coming down on me, then you just open to the sun's light and just let it fill you up. And then, just like body electronics, then see what else comes up. Where else is there tension on my body? I had so many intense experiences with this, and it's so grounding. And so, as I said earlier, if it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to be me. So once you express anger and get it out, what you're saying to your psyche is it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be me. In fact, it's healthy, right? It's an act of self-love to tell yourself it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. When we do our spiritual retreats on Catalina Island, the last 5 years on Catalina Island, I've done them all over. Did them 10 years in Canada and many different places. That's what we encourage people to do, is just be you. How do you feel in the moment? Just express that. If you're sad, cry. If you're angry, shout at the ocean. If you're joyful, laugh out loud, And when people are given the permission to just be who they are in the moment, whatever wants and needs to be healed comes up and gets healed easily and effortlessly. This isn't a promotion because we actually have a waiting list for the retreat for this coming September. But you could get on the waiting list, and we'll probably have some cancellations. And then if not this year, then we'll have plenty of openings for 2023. What else? So release and shift. This is something I developed for myself. And there's a little bit of theory to this as well. So the theory I've come up with is that what we do as human beings is when something uncomfortable happens, especially if it's a conflict between two people, and I get angry, and angry in a way that's not healthy because it's just reactiveness, right? And I end up feeling bad afterwards because I just yelled at somebody I care about, right? Then what usually happens is I judge myself, right? Oh, I shouldn't have gotten angry at my wife for raising her voice at me, right? And then I'll usually come back with a counter argument to, yeah, but she said this to me, so it was absolutely I should have gotten angry at her. And then I think about it again, and yeah, but I could have expressed it in a better way. And then this spiral downward happens where I'm judging myself and arguing with myself about judging myself. And this can go on for minutes, it can go on for hours, depending on how big the issue is. Some people hold a grudge there until they die, right? So that's the spiral downward. So this release and shift process, or release and shift. I haven't done it myself in a while. I guess I'm going to scream for this because you kind of have to. I'm outside here. I don't want my neighbors to call me, so I'm not going to scream too loud. But scream with me if you want to do this. So we're going to do it two ways. We start by defining what are the 2 or 3 qualities you most want to live from in your life, okay? Mine is freedom and joy. Love, peace, whatever it might be. Close your eyes and just get a sense of what are the most healing, pervasive, powerful feelings I want to live from, qualities that I want to live from, right? And so we're going to practice this 2 ways. Once without the cathartic release, and then once with the cathartic release. So this is just the mechanics of it. So just think about a challenging situation in your life. Give you a moment. Especially maybe in, a interpersonal conflict. And then just put your hand on your heart, your fingers on your heart, and just say, release and shift. And what you're shifting to is those 2 or 3 qualities you want to live from consistently. And just notice what it feels like. Okay, and now we're going to do it with a scream. So be prepared to scream with me if you can. If you're in a place where you can't, or you can grab a pillow, and if not, just acknowledge your anger, okay? Let's use anger. Think of an angry situation, because that's the most visceral we can use. It can work with any emotion, fear, pain, whatever, frustration. But let's do it with anger. So now just think about that angry situation. We're going to do a scream in. I encourage people, cuss, get some cuss words out, you know. I did this once there was a retreat at a nunnery in Canada, and we were in this sanctuary, Catholic sanctuary, and I said, this is probably the only time you're going to have permission to cuss in a sanctuary. So you can let it out. All right, so here we go. Think about that situation, that painful, angry situation. And on the count of 3, we're going to scream. If you can't do it now, watch the video and do it later. 1, 2, 3. I can't stand this! Hand on your heart. Deep breath. Release and shift. Shifting to whatever those qualities are, freedom and joy for me. How did that feel? And I've done this with people almost always. It feels much more freeing to do the practice with the cathartic release. And again, just coming back to, once we release, I'm an empty vessel. Now I'm ready to be filled up. So the filling up of those qualities becomes much deeper, much more meaningful, much more immersive experience. So that's how that works. Let's see. Oh, the process. So come back to the process from Busting Loose to the Money Game. I'm not going to guide you through it. We've already been 22 minutes, so we've done that. You can check previous videos where we've done that, or drop me a line. I've got a guided version of the process that I can send you by text or email. So we can do that as well. My voice guiding you through the process. And I'll just say, the first step of the process is what we've been talking about, where you feel the feelings, so that we're not doing a spiritual bypass inadvertently. So you intensify the feelings as much as you can. It doesn't usually involve a sounding, right? Getting the emotion out through sound, but you could add that in. I've never actually done that. It's an interesting thought. And I do believe that the release and shift process that I came up with years after doing the process from Busting Loose to the Money Game was influenced by that. But it's even simpler because it happens like this. And by the way, let me come back to release and shift then. If you're in a crowded room and you can't scream, right? Just come up with some kind of anchor or something to, tap your leg, just as a signal, as a symbol that you are releasing this emotion because you're feeling angry right now, or sadness, or whatever it is. And then just put your hand on your heart, or not even, just take a deep breath and just acknowledge you've got the emotion, get it out, take a deep breath, release and shift. Shift to those positive qualities. That's the integrative approach to do both, to do the both and, to get the feeling out and then shift to the positive. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I just love sharing these with you every week, and I didn't know what I was going to do today. I usually just reflect on what's been happening in my coaching sessions lately, because that's what I'm passionate about, is what I've just been sharing with people. So that's what I'm sharing with you today. And if you've got some value out of this, give us a like, give us a comment. Let us know how that felt for you. And please share with anyone that you think would benefit from this today. And we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week and a fantastic weekend.